What's up, everybody? Welcome again to the Life Warrior Podcast. I want y'all to welcome Mr. Tyler Gangwer. We had some discussions about how to pronounce his last name right before we came on. It's a pretty kick-ass last name, especially if you're military or firefighter, right? I mean, that's not a bad name to have. But Tyler was cool enough to come on. I just met him through a friend, and he sent me his little bit of his story, his background, and he was cool enough to come on to tell his story. Y'all know this Life Warrior thing is not just about military or firefighters, but Tyler is both, has been both, but again, he's also has a Life Warrior story pre-military and pre-firefighting. So we just got through discussing that too, about how, we have those stories. So hopefully we can get into some of that during this podcast, because we've had a good conversation, some insight before we even started talking. But I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about him, and then he can tell you about himself. I'm gonna have to read this, y'all, because man, there's a lot of it. So Tyler served in a battle company. I'm gonna blow this up because my blind self. Second of the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And you were in from 2003 to 2008.
Yep.
In that time you were in, you did 27 months in combat, and received several awards: Bronze Star, Medal with Valor. I don't know what you have to explain to me what some of this stuff means. My brother has these.
Sure.
Valor with Valor device. What does that mean?
So you have a Bronze Star can be somebody as a service award, or they can be given for somebody for actions in combat. Usually when you're given an actions in combat, it comes with like a Valor device. So
Okay.
the award I was given was for Valor. The difference, so you can, basically every ward that's from the Bronze Star down, well, it's not every ward, but the Army, the AAM and ARCOM, or at least the ARCOM and the Bronze Star, can be given with a Valor device, which is a V. It's like a little V that they put on the award.
And it just
that the actions, the incident that happened that the soldier was awarded for, sailor, airman, whatever, was rose to the occasion where it would be a Valor event, and then they recognize that by saying, here's the Bronze Star, but it's a Bronze Star. And then there's the Army Commendation, but then there's the Army Commendation Valor device. So it's done for events that were valorous. The military says that awards aren't supposed to be given out due to rank, but they're given out due to rank. And everybody knows this, and it's one of those things. It's a common, thing, and so
I got you. So I'm learning something new all the time. You were the Bronze Star, the Army Achievement Medal with Valor device, and the Purple Heart. And so for people out there that don't know what the difference between like the Bronze Star, Army Achievement Medal, and like the Purple Heart, what differentiates Purple Heart and Bronze Star and all that?
So the Purple Heart, we like to affectionately call the enemy marksmanship badge, is what you receive for being wounded in action. You have to be wounded in combat, and it has to be, and there's a certain aspect of it that has to be about receiving wounds from enemy fire. The Army Commendation Medal, it's probably the lowest of the awards. And no, well, yeah. So the Army Achievement Medal is, but then you have the Army Commendation Medal, which is next one up. It's very common for junior enlisted people to get that award. It's a service award. It's hey, you did good in training award. Now when you get to combat, if you get it and you're being awarded it for something you've done in combat, that's when they add the Valor device. So in my situation, I have the Bronze Star with Valor, the Bronze Star. So I have two Bronze Stars, and then I have an Army Commendation Medal with Valor, and then I have an Army Commendation Medal for I did, tying my shoes or something. And then you have, and then again, the Purple Heart is it's the oldest award in the Army, or it's the oldest award in the military. It goes all the way back to George Washington. If you look at the Purple Heart, it's got a bust of George Washington on it, and it goes all the way back to them. And it was back in the day, I believe, they would sew it on the inside of their coats, and it was just a way that the Continental Army could recognize the soldiers that have been wounded and are back fighting or have been wounded, period, in their service. You know, and that's where it began.
I got you. Oh yeah, there you go. See, that's I didn't know that. I'd never heard that before. Man, I'm gonna have to have a discussion with my brother. He's 31 years in the Army, and I never got any of this shit out of him. so, so all right. So then after the military, man, you've done quite a few things. A machinist for Anderson Manufacturing, freight conductor for the railroad company C.S.X., which I'm trying to remember if I'd ever, I know BNSF and some of those, but I'd never heard of C.S.X. And then, of course, Firefighter E.M.T., you were part-timer with Colerain Fire Department, Fairfield Fire Department, and then you were on as a career firefighter with the village of Woodlawn, Lincoln Heights. And where is that, in Ohio?
Yeah, it's all in Cincinnati. It's all a part of the greater Cincinnati area.
Gotcha.
I know they do things a little differently down south as far as a lot of places down south, they have a split service. So you have the EMS and you have fire. Well, up north, it's all one. You know, the only individual EMS stuff you'll see is private transport companies. The rest, fire and medic, is all combined. And you know, which shift, you know, you'll be on the medic shift, one of the trucks, you know. So
It's pretty much, there are only a few like around Dallas, and I just heard Fort Worth. You know, Fort Worth was fire, and their ambulance service was private for a long, long time, ever since I moved here back in the day. But I just heard from a guy the other day that said that they took up they're now taken up, and now they're all those dudes that didn't think they were going to have to be paramedics and ride the ambulance.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And where I worked was you had to be both firefighter medic, and so I rode the ambulance before I promoted to driver for 12 years, and oof, yeah. That was not what I signed up for, but but you know, like I said, a lot of great stories came from it too, bad ones and good ones.
Sure.
So moving on now, so you got injured in the fire department.
I did. I was still a pretty young guy, so well, the long and short of it is I had a captain that wasn't very good. Probably shouldn't have gotten promoted, but she got promoted. And we had a structure fire, and we had pretty much knocked it down, and we were kind of doing overhaul, and we started seeing some smoke, you know, active smoke coming out of the soffits. And we kind of got up there, looked around, realized kind of just up in the shingles. It wasn't much. It was just some smoldering. And at the time, so I worked for a ladder company. You know, we were technically a quint, but everybody ran it like a ladder. Yeah. We had to have a quint because the mutual response was at times so limited that mutual aid would take 20 minutes to get to us. You know, we were by a couple volunteer departments, and so we had to be able to have water on scene.
Yeah.
Anyways, long and short of it, I climbed up the ladder, checked it out, knocked things around with my hook a bit. Realized there was still some active smoldering and everything. So I went down to get the water can to kind of get it up there and just kind of knock it down. And our captain was like, "Hey, you got to get up on the roof with a hose." And I was like, "I don't know about this, that." You know, we were basically
up on the roof.
Yeah, and on the edge of the roof too. And so I was like, "All right, whatever. You know, I can probably handle this." Long and short, I couldn't.
Right.
So I ended up slipping, falling, and about whatever it is, 10, 12 feet on the blacktop, on the back of my bottle, on my back, and then caught myself riding our ambulance that night to the
Yeah.
thought it had punctured lungs, broken ribs. I thought it was all messed up. I could barely breathe.
Yeah.
But I calmed down a little bit after a while and realized that, okay, I'm still here. And, my military stuff started kicking in. Like, all right, do a self-assessment. Like, I can breathe just fine. It just hurts. So
Right.
obviously something's not punctured. I don't have any kind of chest movement or, anything like that. I'm just in a lot of pain. Got checked out, and I was home later that evening, and I was only off for about 2 weeks, and then I was back on the job.
Yeah.
Luckily, didn't break any bones or anything. Just had a real gnarly, bruised up back and ribs.
Yeah.
Speak for it, but
Yeah. Yeah. People don't realize, I mean, you think, it's 10, 12 feet. That would sound like a lot, but 10, 12 feet, it'll mess you up. I've because I told somebody the other day, we made a call on a dude that fell. He literally, probably from the tip of his head to the ground, he was just standing on something a little bit elevated to the ground, was probably maybe 4.5, 5 feet, 6 feet, maybe. Killed him. Just because of the way he landed,
Yeah.
and you just 10 feet is a lot further than you think, especially when you're falling backwards and landing on an air pack.
Yep.
So that kind of pushed you in different directions. Is that how I read it?
Yeah. So right around there is where I had my second son, and my oldest was starting to he was getting ready to turn 4. And so we were looking at school, we're looking at the beginning of sports and everything. And, I had a talk with my wife, and, we were looking at I kind of touched home because, again, something happened, again. And I'm like, all right, why am I doing this? Like, why am I in the fire service,
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm like everybody else, service was just kind of something that was always a part of me, and I wanted to serve my community. I wanted to help out. I had a lot of really good buddies and a lot of really good friends that were on at the firehouse, and I loved the job. Loved being in the firehouse. I love all the shenanigans, loved the attitude, loved the lifestyle, but I was doing it for myself, I may not have had such altruistic, really intentions when I was doing it. I was doing it because I loved the adrenaline. It was a way to kind of get my foot back in the door, like it was when I was in the military. I'm in a structured, ranked environment. I've got a mission. I've got a job. I've got this. I'm kind of like no longer being a civilian. Anymore. I'm sidelines, and I kind of had to have a conversation with myself, like, hey, is this the healthiest spot for me to be for family?
Yeah.
And, again, it was just kind of like a culmination of events, me getting hurt. I did go back to the job after that. I still worked for a couple months until I found another position. My wife had been working at the VA as a nurse for about 5 years. We basically met. And, she was like, well, what about the VA? And I said, okay, let's see what can happen with this. And I applied for a position in their gastrointestinal lab as a procedural assistant, and I got it. I said, okay, this is a lot more stable. I'm not going to rush it into burning buildings or dealing with caustic chemicals or trying to get into confined spaces to get people out. And, all these things, and it was a Monday through Friday, 7 to 4 position, and I'd never had a job like that in my life, and I thought it was amazing, and I jumped ship right then. And again, right around the time my second son was born, and it allowed me to be at home every night, help her with the kids, and it took a lot of stress off of our life. She never knows if she's going to get another phone call, and now she's got kids and she's working a 12-hour shift, dealing with all that. So it was the best decision at the time, and I still I don't regret it to make the jump.
I'm sure that phone call she got that you were on the way to the hospital or whatever, or after you got there, after you fallen. I'm sure she didn't take that real well. I know mine would.
luckily, a cousin of mine was working there at the time. He wasn't on that shift. He was on a different shift. And our fire chief was actually, when he listens to the dispatch on his little app he had on his phone. So whenever he gets, I can't remember what the app was called, but it would give us the address and everything. We had, well, long and short, we had a little cell phone app that would pop up on our phones every time we get a run.
Yeah.
Let us know these things. And he got the notification of the structure fire, and he listens in on his days off, and he heard somebody got hurt, and he called in and was like, "Hey, who got hurt?" And they're like, "Hey, it's your cousin," and he was able to kind of get in there, call Sarah, my wife, talk to her a bit, and then calm her down. And then when the chief finally gave her a call, she's like, "I'm already on my way. I'll meet you guys there." She's a tough cookie.
Yeah, you have to be, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I see my sister-in-law the same way. She man, he was gone for most of their youngest son's life, and so that she had to bear the whole weight of all that. Women don't get enough credit. Military wives don't get enough credit. That's for sure.
Same with fire wives.
Yeah, no, it's the same. It's the same.
Single mother,
Yeah.
For at least 12 hours.
Yeah.
24.
So now you've, and I'll backtrack here in just a minute because, I don't want to miss some of this story, but so now you've advanced in the VA, and I want to talk more about the VA stuff. We discussed that a minute ago because about about how the VA looks to the regular person or even, especially the guys that were in the military and sometimes don't really get the help they need or deserve. So I want to backtrack to that, but your new position, what is your new position in the VA now?
So I kind of took a lateral transfer because, the position I was in, I was basically, the only way you could go forward was to go back and get my RN. And I'm not going through clinicals again.
Hell no.
National registry. I don't want to deal with all this.
Hell no.
So I was looking at things, and I had a lot of friends, in the VA that were working there because my wife and myself. And I just said, okay, well, let me try the administrative side of things. I had never in my life done that. I never sat behind a computer and dealt with any of that. I've always been a hand guy, grew up working construction.
Yep.
After that, the Army. After that, manufacturing and then the railroad. So I'd never really done this before. But I was like, you know what? I got to grow. I got to make it. And the only way to get out of just the same thing over and over again is I got to get a new skill set. I got to make myself a little bit more marketable and all these things. And so I took a position laterally as a AMSA. Incredibly fancy, but it's not. It's advanced. Oh my gosh, advanced medical. Oh my gosh, can't even think of the definition of it right now.
Support administrator. I'm reading.
There you go. So the VA is like everything else. They love their acronyms. You could come up with an acronym of a plate of dog crap sandwich, and
right.
Amazing. Wow, that's great because the acronyms doing it all. But so now I do clerical work. I work at actually at the C.S.X community-based outpatient center in the county that I grew up in. So I'm seeing a lot of family, a lot of friends, a lot of like everybody there every day, and we deal with a lot of, we deal with scheduling and checking patients in, dealing with their issues.
Yeah.
And, basically a problem solver. We deal with a lot of clinical specialties like podiatry and physical therapy and things like that. Our community-based out center, our C.S.X, it's got not just primary care, it's got mental health, and it offers a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to be jack of all trades and administer clinically, clerically to the providers, nurses, veterans. That's why we're there.
Well, I definitely want to come back to that because I got, we started a little bit of a discussion before we started on this thing. And I had my experiences. I remember here in Dallas, riding an ambulance for so long, we would take guys to the VA, and it got so bad that we would tell patients, hey, you know, don't go there. You don't want to go there.
Sure.
Trust me, you don't want to go there. I mean, what you're going through is rough. You're having bad chest pains or stomach pains. There's a very good chance we're going to go sit and stand there for an hour and a half before anybody ever see. It was bad. I mean, I got into some confrontations with people at the hospital, and it wasn't, necessarily their fault. They were either shorthanded or, it wasn't that they didn't care, but it was just so poorly run that, I'm like, man, I've been sitting here with this dude screaming in bloody murder pain stomach for an hour and 30 minutes, and everybody's just, and I'm like, y'all not going to pay attention to this dude? Like, I'm trying to tell you, like, can you not hear him? And so I want to get back to that for sure, because I think it's important for people to hear. But I want to backtrack just a minute. So you were in high school, and an athlete, obviously. Did you play football?
Played football.
Yeah, and had aspirations of playing in college.
Yeah,
like most athletes who played. I did too. It was one of those, like I was telling you, my brother was in the Army, and he got sent to Panama. I think it was my senior year of high school. And I remember my mom coming in. I was, freaking in high school, and I was standing in the mirror, getting my hair ready to go find some girls or something. And she was like, hey, just letting you know your brother's going to war. I'm like, what? War? Like, what are you talking about? And so she explains it to me, and like, I remember it just hitting me like, holy shit.
Yeah.
He's going to war. Like, he's fixing to go to war. And we've talked about Panama. It was a shit show. He says it was a shit show, but everybody was trying to get theirs at the same time. And, and it just kind of turned crazy, but he ended up stationed down there for like 6 years, which is where he met his wife. So it turned out good for him.
Yeah.
But I decided, I was playing baseball at the time, and we were really good baseball team. We won back-to-back state championships. We were co-national champions my junior year. We were really good. But I was kind of middle of the pack player, and I knew, I was like, I'm probably not going to play college baseball. I'll just go do what he did. It's kind of inspired me, like, okay, I'll just go to the Army. I'll just follow him. And the only reason, I was like, well, if somebody doesn't ask me to come play college baseball, that's what I'll do. And one junior college asked me to come play. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go play, which ended up being the right decision for me. Had some really good college years playing college baseball, and it took me all over the country, Alaska and California and everywhere, and got to do it. And then I see my brother now, and I'm like, man, he's been through hell, and so I'm like, man, almost like dodging a bullet, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you were in high school, and which tells our age difference. You were in high school, and 9/11 happens.
Yep.
And I was on my way home. I just got off shift, and was on my way home. And my son was born first son was born 14 days later. And so, that was a crazy mindset switch. I'm like sitting there with my wife, and she's like, what is happening right now? Our kid's fixing to be born into this. And now I'm getting calls going, hey, you're going to have to probably come back. And we're on standby. Everybody thinks planes are going to hit the federal building in Dallas. And, so my station was 5 minutes from downtown. And so, that whole mindset shift, that's where you were sitting in high school, going from, I want to be an athlete, to, bam, 9/11. And you got to tell people what you went through. You and your friends, you had 3 of your best friends all
Yeah,
decided.
yeah. So obviously, I was senior year, right in the middle at the beginning of our season there in September. I my junior year I had made all conference, runner up all city. Senior year I was going to do the same thing, and we weren't a good team, but I was a good player, and
Yeah.
so 9/11 happens, and our school's reaction to it was very I would say it probably wasn't very good. But so we'd be walking through the hallways, going class to class, and the teacher would be watching the TV. When they were all up in the wall, up in the corners. Probably don't relate to that anymore. But and we'd come into class, and there'd be pictures of buildings, or planes hitting buildings, or people running, or smoke everywhere. It looked like there was something crazy going on, but nobody would tell us about it. So, the long and short here is that, it took us until the end of the day to find out what happened, and myself and uh, 3 of my buddies, we all were like, hey, this is our opportunity. This is our Pearl Harbor. This is our moment to get out there and do our part and to kind of, make our stand as a generation.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to. I'd always wanted to be in the military. My grandfather was a paratrooper in World War II. My other grandfather was in Australia during the Pacific campaign. So I grew up in a family that literally goes all the way back to the American Revolution.
Right.
Great, however many greats that is, grandfather was in the Pennsylvania militia.
Wow.
Uh, and they'd all been armies. To me, there was only one choice: is the army. And we decided to forego everything. I also do a couple different junior colleges at the time. Wasn't a very good student because I was a little more interested in socializing than I was in actually getting the grades. My brother had played college basketball at Kent State University. My nephew plays. A whole family are collegiate athletes. Miami of Ohio, mostly MAC. Schools. But they were all basketball players. I'm the short man in my family. But I really had to kind of have a gut check. The thing is, I wanted to play, didn't want to be a student.
Yeah.
So
No.
good
That's,
enough.
man. If
I
it
was
wasn't for baseball, I would not have. If it hadn't been for baseball, that is the only way I made it.
yeah,
It was like I knew I just had to have passing grades. I could have cared less
yeah,
about what the hell subject I was taking. It was just when can I get to practice and when
yeah,
can I enter the games, and I could care less, man. So I'm with you. I was the same.
yeah, yeah. And you don't need to have a passing GPA to get in the army. And, you know,
Right.
so we went and we initially actually joined the Ohio National Guard because a lot of our mothers were like, hey, go join the Guard first, because at that time everyone's like, oh, the Guard's not going anywhere. And so like, oh, okay, yeah, so that's a safe choice. So we joined, and we were in the delayed entry program. All of us cavalry unit here in Cincinnati because we didn't have any infantry, and we had a lot of the guys, a lot of the senior NCOs in the unit were infantry, former infantry guys, now retasked to reclassed to Cavs. And we liked it. We did well. We liked everything. We were going to drills. We were going out to the field problems they had. Taking part in this, learning. One of our platoon sergeants was just kind of took us off to the side. And was like, "Hey, you guys like you're into this. Like, what? Why don't you guys go act? Like, what's stopping you from doing this?" And we were like, "I don't really know," because our parents basically told us, and we were older. We were all out of school at this point. And, we're like, okay, well, let's see what this does. And we got our company command to sign us out of the Guard, let us on condition sign into the active duty, and we did that. And 2 of them ended up going to Savannah to be in the Ranger Regiment. One of them ended up going to the Marine Corps. When I was at MEPS, I was originally a Ranger contract with my buddies, but they didn't have any infantry slots. I was like, man, I'm not coming up here for the 4th time to find an infantry slot. And the lady's like, okay, well, we have infantry, but I'm gonna have to put you in. I said, I'll sign that deal.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the time. I didn't know any different units and things like that. But and I never looked back on that. went to basic, got rode up and down, left and right, the walls from drill sergeants and everybody. Found out where my duty station was and how I got secured.
Yeah.
And so I said goodbye to the sports and I said hello to the Army.
Yeah. And so so 9/11, that you go through that. You so when did you went to when was your first combat? I read through here, but when was your first combat? When you get deployed?
Yeah. So I got to the 173rd, got to battle company. The same day I got to battle company, I met a guy named Conductor, who
Yep.
would later go on to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. And we were together from day one, just always getting into trouble, always, doing our thing. Great soldiers, not great garrison soldiers, but we got to the unit right as they got back from the combat dump into Iraq, and we're walking around. We have airborne wings on our unit. That's it, and everybody's got CIBs and jumps. Airborne wings with what they call mustard stain, which is a jump star, a gold jump star. And I mean that's big. That's big time in the airborne. You got to do the thing. So our initial entry into the Army was pretty rough. We got smoked a lot, got called cherry a lot, got FNG treatment,
Right.
but it all kind of made us, kind of stick to each other. And we another buddy, his name is Joshua Charles Brennan. Unfortunately, Josh would later go on to die when he was killed in action during the events of Sal Junta's Medal of Honor. But the three of us were real close. We really kind of bonded with each other. Sal's from Iowa, I'm from Ohio, and Josh from Wisconsin. So we kind of had that whole Midwest in kind of
Yeah.
thing going with each other. And so we had about a year after that. We had about a year's worth of training with the unit, and we would do our different jumps into Grafenwehr, Hohensfeld, do our rear world problems there, and we would train in 2 feet of snow to go fight in the desert. And then in March of 2004, no, I'm sorry, 2005 is when we deployed, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I'd have to get it up. But
I'm with you.
deployed to Afghanistan, and we were in RC7. So our initial few months, we were part of URF out of, oh my gosh, Campfire Airfield. And, it was nice because it kind of gave us a slow walk in combat, and we would get spun up to go out and support, special forces who are out doing missions, or we got spun up to go support some of our allies, Canadians, Romanians, and everybody that were down there. And even some of our own guys. But after a few months, they generally try to rotate the platoons out of there. And we got rotated out to the Artyom River Valley, which is a little bit north of there. And we operated out of a place called, I don't even know if it's still around or not, but Fire Base Balo. And when we got there, it was 4 walls with a lot of donkey crap and chicken crap everywhere. And there wasn't a lot of, we didn't have any HESCOs. We didn't have any barbed wire up, C-wire. We had nothing. We just had all 30 of us, and we just worked our tails off, and we got it to where we built it up to where by the time we left, we had showers, internet, we had all that stuff. We built it all ourselves, did most of our plumbing ourselves, and figured things out, repaired our own generators, and this is just, we were all just pure infantry platoon out there.
Yeah.
The combat in the South was I'd always heard guys, all the guys that were our leadership, they had already gone to Iraq. They had already had their experiences in combat. And, we relied heavily on their judgment and things. And when we got to Afghanistan, they were surprised by the difference in combat. There wasn't any IEDs. It was more just straight gunfights. A lot
Really?
of I remember the first time we took indirect when I was on guard. I was sitting in the tower scanning the sector, and I just saw this bright orange fireball fly up in the air, and I said, "Oh, that's pretty weird. What the heck was that?" And before I even had a chance to turn around and say something to somebody, I hear boom, and then this rocket hits right next to our compound. I'm like, "Oh God!" That's what it was. And
Yeah.
then we had multiple major gunfights. We were lucky. We're fortunate. We had one WIA that deployment. We got in a lot of gunfights. We did a 40-kilometer patrol once, where we called it Operation Walkabout. It took us a couple days. We did 40 kilometers through areas that I'd never seen an American before. Um, Getting into gunfights and skirmishes the whole way. Then we came back from that deployment, had about a year off again, and Sal, myself, and Josh got stop lost. And they were like, "Hey, we're going to go back to Afghanistan." And we're like, "Okay, where are we going?" "Oh, we're going up north, and we're going to this place called Kunar Province." And the original mission was, "Hey, you're going to go to this place called Korengal Valley for a month, and you're going to watch these guys. All you're going to do is overwatch construction companies. They're going to get in there. They're going to lay blacktop. They're going to make this road, and it's going to go straight in the back. And then you guys are going to be pulled out of there." Things changed.
Yeah.
The aircraft. The day we got off the aircraft, we took fire, and I mean, it was not like farmers on the ridge line a kilometer away peppering some AK fire. It was well equipped, well trained, well funded, highly motivated. I guess they called them at the time anti-coalition militia, but it was Haqqani Network, it was Al Qaeda, it was Pakistani military guys, and they put it to us. And I mean, we were at a 1 in 4 killed wounded ratio in the Korengal Valley for probably 3 or 4 months. I think we averaged. I've heard. I don't have like data, and there's a lot of people that relate their stories, but we were at somewhere between 300 to 450 burned gunfights in that deployment.
Man.
And we lost. I lost my platoon sergeant in our platoon alone. We lost, Sergeant First Class Matthew Biskowski, Joshua Charles Brennan, Hugo Mendoza, our platoon medic. We lost 3 different medics in that valley. One of them was a corpsman that was there in support of the Marines that were attached to us. So it was a unique experience. I'd never been in a gunfight the first day I got in combat before. And they were also well equipped. I mean, they had Dishkas, which is like the Russian equivalent of a 50 cal.
Yeah.
30 millimeter grenade launcher that's very similar to our Mark 9.
Yeah.
And it was just it was the Wild West up there. The terrain changes too, so it's a little bit more steep, a little bit more vertical, a lot more trees, like big trees, arms around.
Yeah, it's I watched a lot of shows on the Korengal Valley, and man, you're like, man, it is mountainous as hell. Like, it was crazy how. What was the elevation there?
I think we were at 12. So I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say I remember at one point, if we walked to the top of the ridge line that was behind us, I think that was 12,000 feet.
Holy shit, man!
Yeah.
Man. So you're fighting and moving and man, you're talking about stressed.
Yeah.
Trying to breathe, trying to fight and breathe at the same time.
Yeah.
Man.
So it's always a dogfight between who can get to the high ground in Afghanistan. And it's with the kind of equipment we were carrying, camouflage that we had, which wasn't camouflage at all because it was that old ACU pattern, which nobody still even understands how that even got adopted or why it was adopted for the time it was adopted. But you could see us coming from a mile away. You could hear us a mile away because we were so loaded down. We definitely did not. The only advantage I would say that the ACM had on us in that Afghanistan period was their speed, their ability to move quietly and move quickly, at terrain or with the terrain and at elevation. But all of our fire bases were at low elevation. All the bad guys were high elevation. So it was really shooting fish in a barrel for them,
Man. Gosh, I don't even, like I said, you can't even, watching the shows, you're like, you're blown away by it, but there's no way to put a regular person to put yourself there. And, like you said, it's that feeling of every day you're having a fight, but every day you're at a disadvantage. Every day you're there, all day, every day. You're, like you said, shooting fish in a barrel that you don't have the high ground. I mean, yeah, man, and I'm sure it's cold as hell. I'm sure it's
Oh
cold
yeah,
as hell at night, and man. So how long were you there?
I was in the Corps Gulf for 15 months.
Whew, son.
Yeah, yeah. We unfortunately rolled the dice and we lost that round roulette to old Senator Clinton at the time. That was back when she decided to come out with her policy on sustainment, meaning that we do longer deployments downrange, which means we do fewer deployments, which means more dwell time back at you. But it never worked out. They gave I think two different rounds of the O.E.F. Operation Enduring Freedom deployments went that way, and then that was that. So there was only it was like ourselves and then whoever replaced us, or and maybe the 10th Mountain before us because we replace them. They got hit with these 15-month deployments, and they were insane. Which the thing about the 15-month deployments were my first deployment was a 12-month, and you only in Afghanistan you have fighting seasons because it does get so cold in the winter, and you guys running around in flip flops and jams, they're going to freeze to death.
Right.
So the fighting stops, and then they go find a house or a city, and they're back to being regular old Joe Afghani. But you know, with the 15-month deployments, depending upon how your deployment played out season wise, you'd end up being there for two fighting seasons, and we were there for two fighting.
Wow.
So we watched the fighting season end, and then we froze over. I mean, up to our waist, and then it all thawed out. We had like a little monsoon season where it rained on
Just to
ridiculously.
say, like, yeah, it's probably like being in Colorado, right, or somewhere like
Very,
that. And
very similar to the American West. The trees look the same. It's very like they have those big ponderosa pine looking things,
yeah,
you know. And
muddy as hell after it all melts. And gosh, man,
yeah,
I bet that was miserable. Gosh dang.
yeah. I
Well,
mean, it wasn't so
oh,
bad. I'm used to the cold. I'm a big guy. Cold doesn't affect me as much as the heat
right.
does. For some of the guys, yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal because they couldn't stay warm.
Well, it's always you always when leave it up to senator to making those decisions for people.
Yeah,
It's easy. Well, it's like I told our chief one time. I was like, it's easy for you to make those decisions because you ain't the one doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's easy to make those decisions with no problem because you ain't the one having to do it.
yeah.
But man, well, all right. So out of that, so you were there 15 months and lost a bunch of friends. Um, Mindset wise, where were you at that time after that deployment?
After that deployment, it took me years to process. It really did. It took me years to kind of. It's almost not. It's almost like I didn't really process it until a few years afterwards, and really where I started to kind of put my hand. So during that deployment on the night of October the 25th, in support of Operation Rocket, um, myself, my gun team, and a squad of my platoon, along with a scout attachment, went on an overwatch to try to repatriate some American equipment taken off of one of our kids. And why we did that kind of broke one of the major rules of land warfare, and that's you don't enter the same way or exit the same way you enter an area, right? Because it allows your enemy to take advantage of that. And they'll set. And fortunately, with the ridge line we went on, there was one way in and one way out because, as you said, the just so austere, so steep. And on our way back, um, our element walked into an L. We were probably outnumbered like 2 to 1, up there, somewhere in that range. And unfortunately, appointment at the time was Josh Charles Brennan, a real good friend of mine. He walked point blank PKM, which is a belt fed machine gun.
Yeah.
And they initiated on us. It was all the dead bodies we found that night. Everybody had a Pakistani military ID on, and they initiated. It was a good ambush. It was. We would have done the same thing. It was a solid
Right.
ambush. You initiate at the point with your belt fed, and then use your small arms and your rocket propelled grenade support. And they had us squeezed. And the first squad element, which would have been Josh and Sal, were pinned down, and I was in the back with my gun team, and I couldn't fire forward. There was nothing to the left or right of us because it was a sheer cliff.
Yeah.
And uh, my platoon, the three different men that were standing in front of me were all Hispanic men, so they're all 5'6" and smaller, and we were all ducks in a row, and they all got shot. I didn't, so I don't know how that plays out in the world, but it does. And unfortunately, our platoon medic was one of those. His name is Hugo Mendoza, and he would die from his wounds that night. Died in my arms, actually. And the engineer attachment we had was Sergeant Baez, and then my squad leader, Sergeant Christopher Reyes. And Chris Reyes was shot in the head twice. His helmet stopped both rounds. And Sergeant Baez was shot in the leg, and it had pierced his femoral artery, and Hugo femoral artery. And unfortunately, looking back on it, again, it's another tip of the hat to the bad guys because they were using grazing fire, which is a technique you do where you don't necessarily shoot at a specific target. You just kind of keep your rounds about a meter off the ground and about, certain, I can't even remember what it is anymore, out. And you just hold people in place, and then you'd let your PKM and your RPG work. It was effective. And at one point, I was in the back, and I heard I'm hit. Help. So I drug my squad leader back behind a rock, and at the time, I thought I didn't realize what was happening to him because I didn't see the 2 bullet holes in his helmet, and he was incoherent. So I stuck him there with my machine gunner ammo bearer, and our scouts had finally arrived. And I said, I'm going forward. So I took off running forward. And as I started to turn around this bend in rocks, I started getting shot at again. It just hitting all around me. So I dove down a hill. And when I dove down the hill, I found Baez and Mendoza. And Mendoza he had a golf ball or a softball sized wound, inner thigh. And by the time I picked him up, he was breathed his last breath. And he ended up dying. Sergeant Baez was able to get a tourniquet on and get his bleeding stopped. And I'm sure my work was terrible because I wasn't an E.M.T or anything, so I imagine my probably not great. But job but as this was going on, our forward element, as I said, Josh walked. I'm kind of jumping around here. Josh had walked into a PKM. Grievously wounded the instant they initiated contact. Almost every single person in Sal's squad was hit. Squad leader, everything down was hit. And at this point, Sal realized that he couldn't find all of his guys. So he stood up in the midst of all this fire, and he charged the center point of the line. And he ended up breaking the ambush and killing 2 people and repatriating Brennan back. Unfortunately, the Taliban were dragging Josh off because they wanted to make a example of him. He was still alive, but they wanted to make an example of him, and they would have a trophy. And they had already taken equipment off of a guy a couple days before, so I'd imagine everything that was going through our minds at the time was, "Hey, we're not getting taken alive. We're going to go. You're going to take all of us. You're going to take none of us." Yeah. And Sal was able to break the ambush at that point, and the ACM fled. And by that time, we had AH-64s, we had A-10s, we had an AC-130. They called everything in on us because we were being overrun, and the whole valley around us just started detonating. And it was just probably that AC-130 probably stuck around for another 2 hours in the valley, just shooting everything that moved at night. And Sal would later go on to win the Congressional Medal of Honor for that. Become the first living man since Vietnam to get it. So all that.
Did you witness him doing this? Did you see him doing this?
So no, I didn't. Again, I was in the back with the injured. They effectively cut us off. So there was probably Baez, Reyes, Mendoza, Gary Burns, 5. So there was 8 of us in the rear, and probably another 10 forward of us. And so
and the distance between the rear and the front, how far?
at max 20 meters, at
Yeah.
max 20 yards, nothing. We were all originally ducks in a row. We
Yeah.
were walking a file out. Again, terrain dictated our movement,
Right.
and um, so when the contact initially happened, first squad attempted to bound forward and execute battle drill 1 alpha on the bad guys, and or battle drill 1, and their aggressive move forward kind of created that space between us because they weren't aware that what was going on in the rear. Unfortunately, when I carried Hugo up myself to the casualty collection point. Our platoon leader and our platoon sergeant were both with us because we knew it was going to be a rough one. And they asked, what's his status? And I said, I'm sorry, sir, he's dead. And it was a shock to them. And I was like, wait, it dawned on me that we weren't communicating because my squad leader who had the radio had already taken 2 hits to the helmet and he hadn't been communicating with anybody. And then, so I found out about what happened and I found out about Josh as they were loading Josh onto a medevac. And we
Yeah.
had multiple medevacs flying in and they were all rappelling down because they could not land. And they were putting, men on into the baskets and hoisting them out. And it was a thing, it was definitely an event that stuck with me for years.
Yeah.
And to go back to your original question about how I kind of dealt with things afterwards, it took a while, and it took until we were in D.C. and we were at the president at the White House, and we were, going through the process of Sal being awarded his medal, and they had asked the guys to come back and to kind of be a part of the whole ceremony, and it wasn't until I'd really ran into the parents of Hugo Mendoza, or I guess the event itself gave us closure that I
Yeah.
really started to process it and breathe and understand. I mean, it's causing me underlying anxiety, the post stress. It's some of the guys. Everybody acts like they don't have post traumatic stress, but everybody does have post traumatic stress because it's not a normal thing to do these. It's not a
Right.
normal thing to kill people or see people killed. And,
Right.
and everybody has the same biological function else, so we all process it. I didn't realize the level of anxiety that it had been causing me. And I've been drinking and wasted a large chunk, if not all, of my GI Bill on basically being in college, but not being in class, and drinking and partying and, doing all these things to just try to feel alive, I guess. And,
And
it took me a while. It did. It took me probably the better part of 5-6 years to really kind of get my head right and realize, I always, I say it took meeting my, and realizing like, hey, wow, I've got this beautiful, wonderful woman. I've got to get my crap together, and I can't be, bearded, disgruntled vet guy that,
right.
that personality type that everybody wants to kind of go at.
Right.
And I had to soften myself. I had to work on myself, improve myself to everything. And through the process of that, meeting her, it kind of brought me back out of it all, brought me to life.
So people asked me when I first came up with this thing, life warrior. They were like, what does that mean? How does it, how'd you come up with it? And so, it people always, I'm that guy, and I don't know if you're this guy, but literally I can be sitting anywhere. Doesn't matter where I'm at an airport, at a stoplight with a homeless guy. It doesn't matter where I'm at. People they just tell me they end up telling me their entire life story. Just always has been that way. And so I would always, say when they were telling me stuff, I'd be like, man, that's some life warrior shit you're doing, you've been through or whatever. And it never really dawned on me. I was saying it, and I didn't even really know what the meaning was for me. But I finally was like, it's like one day I was like, man, I got to do something different. I got to do something with this thing. And with this thing where people come and tell me their stories all the time. And it was like one day God going, hey, dumb shit, Have you not been listening to the word you've been using for 2 years talking to people? And so I was like, all right, well, let's look into it. What is the definition of warrior? Anybody trained in combat, right? And I was like, okay, but there's a part of that definition where I was scanning down, and it was like anyone engaged in conflict or struggle, anyone. I was like, okay, that can be anybody. Doesn't have to be a military. Doesn't have to.
Well, I can hear you right now, man. I couldn't hear you there.
Yeah, I forgot. I should have put my thing. I should have put it on do not disturb, because if somebody calls, then it interrupts it, so it'll start over again. So uh, anyway, so I was saying that that um, that definition, that warrior definition, anybody trained in combat. There's another part of it that says um, anyone engaged in conflict or struggle. I'm like, all right, that's a regular person in life, right? And what do you have to do in life? Sometimes you have to wake up when you don't want to. You have to go to work when you don't want to. You have to take care of your kids when you don't want to. You have to do all that shit that you don't really feel like doing, but you do it because you have that mindset of, I have to. And so you put those two together. That's doing life. You're still doing warrior shit because you're having to, fight just for life, right? And then I always tell people, I told my brother, I was like, military guys in the military, it's even harder because first you go do warrior shit, true warrior shit, and then when you come back, now you got to try to figure out how to act like a regular person, and that is like my brother said. He goes, war was way more simple, way more simple. And he's like, it was the lines were pretty straightforward. Whereas now I got to come back and try to figure out how to live with this shit in my head. That was way worse. And now he's got that, and he's trying to have a regular job and, pay bills and do all that mundane shit that'll drive you crazy. And so I assume that's probably exactly what you experienced, was that very thing, having to go. It's like I told people when I left baseball, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. All I'd ever been my whole life was a baseball player. Now that was finished, just like that. Now what? Well, okay, I guess I'll go be a firefighter. Okay, dive in, let's go. 22 years of it, man, that was my identity. That's what I did. Then one day it was like, well, that shit's over. Now what? Now what am I? All that, paramedic, hazmat training, trench rescue, high angle rescue, all that crazy shit that you did now doesn't mean a thing, and that's a hard pill to swallow, man. Hard to maneuver through. And so I'm sure that's exactly what you were experiencing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's I think that some of the guys that struggle the most are the ones, like you said, they kind of cling to that identity.
Yeah.
Is they don't have the ability, or they're it's taken them a while to work through the ability of saying, okay, well, I'm not a soldier, I'm not a sailor, I'm not an airman, I'm not a Marine, I'm not a ranger, a paratrooper, or a scout. I'm not any of that anymore. What I am now is, it's mundane, it's boring, and it's hard for a lot of those guys to make that transition and to make that pivot in life, because war is simple, and a lot of guys like simplicity. And you wake up, you do your duties, you go out, you go to your patrol, you come back, you eat chow, you hang out with your dudes. So it's a very simple and very kind of primal life, um, which is and then you throw into there the whole adrenaline aspect of it, which is addictive as heck for a lot of young men. And you have purpose, and you have a uniform, you have an identity that you didn't have to build, but it's an identity, right? You get to claim your unit, you get to claim your branch, you get to claim all these. You're fighting in the war. I'm a veteran. The status of veteran. And it allows, I think, a lot of guys to kind of hide who they really are and what their real person is underneath behind all those different labels. And then when they get home and they realize, oh wow, I don't have those labels anymore. Like, yeah, I'm a veteran, but does anybody really care that much unless it's Veterans Day or Memorial Day or the 4th of July? Or out because that's a hard thing for a lot of guys to grasp. Is that when you go to I don't know, the grocery store, like, they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. And you know what the thing is, they don't have to. And the rest of the world has gone on about its life, and it 20 years worth of war, and what 1% of the country fought in it.
Right.
So you gotta be able to look at that and say, okay, well, to me that was important, but it might not be important to the everyday person. They may think that it's important to them. They may say, hey, I love the troops, I love my veterans, all these things, but they don't understand the level of importance that is to some people and how that's kind of been burned into them and become part of who they are and stuff, and now they've got to say, okay, well, that's always going to be a part of me, but I now have to be a dad.
Yeah.
I now have to be Steve in the office. I now have to be somebody else. I have to be a productive member of society. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to make that transition.
So
I do it in a perfect way. I don't think there is a perfect way to do it.
yeah.
I think opportunities, luck, and all these things have to play into it too.
Right.
What the kind of home you left and the kind of home you come back to, like we were talking about earlier. There's kind of that archetype as far as from which a lot of combat troops are drawn. Not stable homes, not stable parents, not stable. There may be histories of abuse. There may all these things, and they come back, and it's like, is a lot of your issues really that you did all these things at war, or is it that you did all these things at war in addition to your untreated, unrealized, unreally kind of spoken childhood issues?
Yeah.
And then
It's funny you said that earlier before we were talking, because it never hit me, but I didn't put the two together until you said it when we were talking before about shit, man. A lot of the dudes, the friends of mine that were in the military, like, I talked to them about their story before, and it was exactly that. And I was like, man, when you said that, I started rolling through the Rolodex of my friends, and I'm like, holy shit, man, that's 100% true. Abuse, or, alcoholic parents, or, whatever. Not all of them, but a bunch of them. And man, that's an interesting. I don't know if the military knows, like you said, they understand that and they thrive on it and use it. I don't know. I know I don't. I've said this before. I love my country, but I don't trust my government for shit.
Oh, absolutely. And I work.
I mean, and just listening to stories from my brother, even he was talking about, like, he loved the Army, loved being part of the Army for a long, long time. And then at one point, he's like, it switched to where he felt like he was just a number, like being in prison. Like, here's your number, and wasn't getting out of it what he put into it. But man, that's an interesting thing. I'd like to, research more. Like, I never really put that together too until you said it. But man, that's a crazy thought process that all the kids, these are kids. You were a kid when you went in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of messed up kids in this world, and a lot of those messed up kids end up in our military.
They do. And I think you take a person from that type of environment, and they're looking for guidance, they're looking for leadership, they're looking for purpose, they're looking for something. They're very malleable.
Right.
And I think that I don't think that there's necessarily, I don't think the Army recruiter is literally sitting there, or recruiter's literally sitting there wringing his hands going, "Ooh, I've got one."
Right.
I,
Right.
I think that, I think it's more of a situation that, the two things kind of draw each other out. I think that, again, kids that are in those types of homes or have had those types of childhoods are often drawn to something that can get them out of there as quick as
Yeah.
possible, but at the same time give them some sense of power. Because they grew up in these households, and they were powerless against the traumas that happened. And I think that the military and the thought of becoming this rough, tough, man's man, or I don't really know too much about the female aspect of it. But I'd imagine it's probably still similar because we're all human. But they look for something, and they find that, at least on the surface, with the military, unit dependent. My unit, I had always had great officers, great NCOs. It was really a family. We really were a band of brothers unit. A classical paratrooper style unit. I stayed in the same platoon, same company, and same unit for 4 years straight, which is unheard of in most cases. And that's through promotions and everything. Um, but yeah, it's hard to make sure when everything's said and done, you're finally out. If you don't address the childhood issues, in addition to addressing the war
Yeah.
or the traumas that you received from those, you can't really treat it unless you treat the entire thing. You can say, okay, I'm getting treatment for my post traumatic stress, and then my wife, why isn't your drinking going down? Why isn't your melancholy going down, or your depression, or any of these other signs and symptoms of post traumatic stress? Why aren't we seeing a relief from them? Well, was it the war, or was it the childhood? That did this to you, and now that you're an adult, or you're a parent, or any of these things, now you have all these triggers happening around you about your childhood. And you're like, okay, well, which
Yeah.
one is it? And then, unfortunately, the VA doesn't, and the military itself don't do a good job of monitoring and maintaining people's mental health. It's as you said, in regards to the fire service. There was a large stigma. They tend to do one of two things. They either stigmatize it and you know make everything worse, or they overcompensate and make everything worse,
Yeah.
because then they don't allow veterans to have any kind of feel empowered. You're this broken, shattered thing that we have to monitor and keep our eyes on, because you could do anything at any moment. You're basically a caged animal, or it's what's wrong with you? Why aren't you tougher than this? And hopefully things are changing. They're kind of coming towards the middle on all of it, because I do think the answer's somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And one of the best things I ever heard about post traumatic stress. I know we're kind of getting on a tangent here,
Well, that's
but
okay. It's a needed tangent, I think. Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, but go ahead.
Well, one of the best analogies about post traumatic stress in regards to like the fire service I ever heard was one of my old captains was explaining to us, and he was talking about how when you're in the army and you're at war, or when you're in the military and you're at war, it's like a dump truck backing up, and you're a bucket, and it just dumps everything on you. That bucket's full, right? And then you got to find ways of emptying that bucket. All right. But when you're in the fire service, it's like the dump truck backs up and the person's got a scoop, and that bucket's still getting filled. They're just doing it in a slower manner, right? Because it's everybody's had those. I slept through the night shifts,
Yeah.
and then you sleep through the night, right at shift change, as you said, you get um, a 4-year-old choking on toast at his house breakfast.
Yeah.
In that little bucket, a little bit more, a little bit
Yeah.
more, a little. A filled bucket is a filled bucket.
Yeah.
How it gets filled doesn't matter. It's
Right.
the fact that it's full and needs to be emptied that's the issue. And the the more it gets filled, the more those things feed on each other and build on each other and expand on each other, and before you know it, you can't hear a baby cry without, having a extremely aggressive and, visceral reaction to it. Or you can't hear a firework, and you have to go, you know, do whatever they do, so it's definitely it's the same, but it's it's the same, but it's different, but it's still the same, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I get you. Um, well, Tyler, you tell me, but I feel like I want to do another podcast with you
Sure.
and dive into the VA thing,
Yeah.
PTSD thing, um, because I think there's a lot more there. Now that we're talking about it, I feel like there's a ton more there.
Oh yeah.
And so I want to do that and kind of have a part two. And who knows, man, there's some other stuff I want to discuss with you too that have come to my mind during this whole thing about, I've had these discussions with other firefighters around the country since you've been part of that brotherhood too, about lack of brotherhood thing kind of disappearing, falling off by the wayside. I've talked to guys in Baltimore and New Mexico and New York and Canada and, and it seems to be the same everywhere. So I want to talk about that. So let's do that. But before we finish this one, I always ask people, man, you've had a whole ton of warrior and life warrior stories. And so from your experiences right now where you're sitting, you're obviously doing good. Everything's going great. You got a great family and kids and the whole 9 yards. And from your experience, it could have easily gone a different path. You were talking about drinking and doing all that, and you were going that direction, and you had to make a decision. If somebody's listening that was sitting there in your shoes, that's sitting there where you were sitting in college and throwing away your money like that, what I would say, life warrior decision, what would you tell them would be the major thing that would direct their path somewhere else?
I would tell them that give yourself grace, realize that you're going to make mistakes. You're not done making mistakes. And, I haven't crossed the finish line. I could still screw this all now.
Yeah.
I can have a moment where I relapse and no one knows what comes tomorrow. I would tell them, just give yourself grace. Get help. Even if you don't think you need it, you still, therapy and things like that can help you move past things. They can help pull things out that were holding you back that you didn't even know were there.
Yeah.
Find a group of loved ones that'll stick by you and stick by them. Pick a direction. It doesn't have to be, we live long lives. That's the thing. When you're young, it's really hard to understand that you are going to be on Earth for 60 years, So again, give yourself grace. Pick a direction that you find to be interesting. Pursue it. Go down that route to the best of your ability. If you get halfway down that route and it's just not what you thought it was, or it's not working out, it's okay. Change.
Yeah.
Change. Take a pivot. Build your network. Try to find people that are in a similar position to you. Try to find somebody who's doing really well, and then you're like, hey man, what do you do? What is working so well for you?
Yeah.
And then chase it. Emulate that. There's it's not always going to be a 1-for-1. But strive to do your best in those things. And again, grace. You're going to make mistakes. Life doesn't end because you made mistakes. There's always a third. I'm not a 3-strike guy.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 strikes. No, there's 4 or 5. It's an endless amount of strikes. You only lose when you lose. You choose to lose. When you lay down, you say it's over. That's when you lose. But you don't have to. And everything you do doesn't have to be a home run. Get a base hit, man.
Yeah.
I'm not a baseball player, but I use a lot of baseball analogies.
Right.
So just give yourself and understand that it's all a process and that you have time. You have time to figure this out. You have time to decompress. You have time to unwind. Alcohol is not your friend. Alcohol is not your friend. It's affecting you on levels that you don't even understand. It's screwing up your. It's screwing up. It's not just the damage it does to your. It's not just the dumb things that you do when you're on it.
Right.
That's not telling you not to drink. That's just me telling you it's not your friend.
Right.
Don't lean on
Yeah.
it. It'll hurt you.
Yeah.
And just if it's God, get back in the church. If it's your kids, get deal with your kids. Find purpose.
Yeah.
Find purpose, self grace.
I always tell people, you have to find every day. You have to wake up and find a why. Sometimes that why is not the same every day. It can be your kids one day. It can be your work one day. It doesn't matter. Just a why. So I tell people, we're doing a shirt right now, but I always tell people, man, I wake up every day and I stand up and I go, all right, man, go do life warrior shit today. Whatever it is, man, you don't want to go to work, but you have to go do it. Just get it done, and try and find purpose in it. There's always a why, and it took me a while to figure that out. But man, I appreciate that. You good for another podcast?
Yeah,
I'm gonna put something together, and I'm gonna put it together, and I'm gonna shoot it your way, and we can figure out some topics, man. I think there's some good stuff to come out of this. If you're down for doing it,
I'm 100%.
And so I guess now next thing is Tennessee, Ohio State. We'll see.
Yeah, good luck.
I can't say I'm going to root for Ohio State. I got Tennessee balls in the house, so
yeah.
But both my kids go to TCU, so they pretty much shit the bed this year. So
yeah,
I got to find something else. But yeah, man. What's that?
That they made the playoffs last year.
I know. Yeah, I was happy. That was good. That was my son's. It was supposed to be his senior year. He's come back again for another year, but I was glad he got to go experience that. He got to go to both bowl games and all that. And that was something he got to experience. So that was cool. But yeah, we'll see, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Tyler, man. It's a pleasure to meet you, man. And I look forward to more podcast stuff. I think it's going to be good, and we'll put it together, and we'll see what we come up with.
All right, man.
All right, y'all. Again, YouTube. I'll get this edited out, and we'll put it on the YouTube page, and I'll let everybody know when it comes out, and then we'll figure out when we're going to do part 2 and part 3 and part however many. We can throw Cliff's dumbass in there too if he wants to. But yeah, we'll put it together, and I'll let everybody know when it's coming out. Again, appreciate everybody watching the Life Warrior podcast, and remember, y'all wake up tomorrow, y'all, and go do Life Warrior shit. Peace.